September 16th is an important day in the Wheel of Time fandom. This year, it's the 1-year anniversary of production starting on the Wheel of Time TV show, but it's also the 13th anniversary of Robert Jordan's passing. And for me, that also means it's around the time I started reading the series for the first time. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that experience, but this isn't just about me. I wanted to celebrate and reflect on the Wheel of Time fandom. And to do that, I've brought together content creators and fans of the Wheel of Time to talk about their experience. How did they find the Wheel of Time? What was it like reading it for the first time?
There's something about the Wheel of Time that keeps people coming back for more, endlessly discussing and creating, from websites to podcasts to videos, music, art, and more. And I wanted to try to capture that, even in some small way.
This is a tribute to that community, that Wheel of Time fan community, which has been such an incredible group to be a part of. And so here they are.
Everyone comes to the series in a different way. My story goes way back to maybe 1992, I think. And what happened is that I was a member of the Science Fiction Book Club of America. And we would receive in the mail these little pamphlets that had booklets that had ads for books that you could pick up. Now back then they had this deal where you could pay a penny and get 3 free books in the mail, and then they charged you every month for all sorts of other books. But what I did, my first 3 selections, I was looking through a catalog, just like this one. This one is from May 1994. Showing my age here, and it's featuring the Fires of Heaven. But I had a similar one back then that I no longer have that featured other Wheel of Time books. So I was going through looking for my selections to choose what my 3 free books would be. And I decided that I was going to get The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn. Now I knew nothing about the Wheel of Time or Robert Jordan. I was probably 13 years old or so at the time. But I loved the cover of The Dragon Reborn. There was just something about Rand reaching for Kalendor that just blew my mind. That artwork it drew me in. Like Kalendor singing to Rand, that cover sang to me. And so I went out and I figured, hey, this is book 3. But if I want to get to that book, I have to read the first 2 first. And their covers are okay. Now, I clearly love the original covers of The Eye of the World and the other ones, whatever, but it was that third one that drew me in. But I eventually, a couple of years later, I picked those books up off the shelf, and I haven't looked back since.
Hey, my name is Lauren, and I'm a Wattaholic. It all started in the mid-90s. I don't remember the exact year, but I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. Look at this handsome devil. Pure ladies, man. When I wasn't busy getting action, I was learning to juggle or unicycle or perform magic tricks for my mom. Like I said, the ladies loved me. But more often than not, I had my nose in a book. One time I did some house sitting for a neighbor, and he saw that I had come prepared with lots of books to read, so he handed me this. Well, not this exact copy. I long since lost that one, after the cover pages disintegrated from rereading it too much and lending it out to anyone who would listen to me. I think some people borrowed the book from me just so I would shut up about it. I even got my dad to read The Wheel of Time eventually. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. When my neighbor handed me The Eye of the World, my first reaction was to judge the book harshly based on its cover.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
I'd never read fantasy before. It took me 3 months before I finally decided to read it, and then it took another month for me to get through the prologue and opening chapters. Then came Winter Night, and the rest is history. I plowed through all of the published books at that point. I think I was all caught up just as A Crown of Swords came out. I remember the first book that I waited for was A Path of Daggers. I purchased that and every one after it on day 1 when it was released. I would lose myself for hours browsing theories and forums, reading about and discussing the books. I still remember the day I found the Watt Fac and how obsessed I became with Asmodean and Lanfear and Varen theories. Now I make videos and animations for a living, and my excitement for the TV show has reignited my obsession. I run a YouTube channel where I unravel the Wheel of Time lore and mythology. I made an 8.5-minute video about the recent What on Prime 11-second Wheel of Time TV show teaser, so I guess you could say I like talking about these books. Maybe a little too much. Honestly, I could quit Wheel of Time at any time. I just don't need to quit because I don't have a problem. Send help.
How did I start reading The Wheel of Time? Well, one of my roommates' boyfriend gave me a copy of The Eye of the World. I had just finished reading The Lord of the Rings, a book that I read for a course that I was studying in university, and I wanted to read another fantasy book. Both of my roommates were really, really into fantasy, and so I had asked them, and I guess one of them mentioned it to her boyfriend, because I just remember he came over to our house and handed me a copy of The Eye of the World. He had started it and didn't like it and was going to throw it away and gave it to me instead. And I remember him telling me as he gave it to me the reasons that he didn't like it. Like, it was like, oh, it's just copying Tolkien and it has all these cliches and blah, blah, blah. But I remember as he was telling me this, oh, you're telling me that this book is a lot like Tolkien. And the whole reason that I want to read another fantasy book is because I want to experience that feeling that I got from The Lord of the Rings. So, all right, the reason you don't like it is kind of the reason I want to read it. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so I started it. I had specifically asked for a standalone book, so I thought it was, and I got to the end of The Eye of the World and was like, well, that's a very odd way to end this story. This was in like the early to mid 90s. We did not have the internet at our place, so that was just it. Like, I didn't look it up, didn't think to ask anyone. My roommate's boyfriend didn't know, so whatever. It was a few months later in a bookstore, just randomly seeing the cover to The Great Hunt, that I realized it was a series and that it was not finished. But yeah, that's how I started. That particular boyfriend of my roommate's turned out to be a jerk. Do not like him, but will always be grateful to him for having got me started in the Wheel of Time.
I started reading The Wheel of Time in 2007, shortly after Robert Jordan died, which is a strange time to begin picking up the series. But the reason was my husband had been a longtime fan of The Wheel of Time, and even though I'd seen him reading the books, he'd never really talked to me about them. But when Robert Jordan died, I saw how much that impacted him and how much the series meant to him. And to me, that was what made me want to read the series, was knowing how important it was to him and what could be in this series that would make it so compelling. And I was totally hooked once I got into it. Even, I think, not knowing for sure that it was going to be finished yet, although there was definitely a possibility. And just tearing through the series and then waiting for the next books by Brandon Sanderson to come out. So then I didn't really get involved in the Wheel of Time fandom until around the time I wanted to start this channel. But my experience participating in that community has been so incredible, and the people that I've gotten to interact with and who have supported me are amazing.
So why do I like the Wheel of Time and how to get into it? Well, I was 9 years old. I got a couple of gift certificates from my step-grandparents for Kohl's, which was a bookstore in my hometown. I went there and I picked up 2 books just after Christmas, before New Year's. I think it was the 27th or 28th of December. And the books were Homeland by R.A. Salvador and The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Now, I picked up The Eye of the World because I thought the cover art was cool. I really liked fantasy. I was big into the Dragonlance books at the time, and I enjoyed anything with, looks like warriors and armor and swords. I devoured the book. I finished it before New Year's. I loved it immensely. And then as each book came out, I either had them pre-ordered or I was there the day they were released, picking them up, getting them as they came. And I read them and reread them until they fell apart. I really enjoyed them. Now, I did not have a great childhood, and the books really helped me through it. So a lot of the adult male role models in my life were from books. Tanis from the Dragonlance series, Brunner from the Icewind Dale trilogy and the Forgotten Realms books, Lan from The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, the whole Wheel of Time series, really. These books helped raise me. These books were my friends. These books were a comfort in times that were not so great and rough. I read and reread, and they became a part of my family. They became a part of me, and I really enjoyed them, and they helped me escape to a place where things were okay, things were good. Yes, there was evil, yes, there was bad, but I was sure good would prevail, and these people were so real and so good that it just made me feel important and amazing to be a part of it, reading it. And then as I got older, and the books still came out, I would still get them as they came out and still read them till they fell apart. And I started keeping track of my rereads. And I didn't reread just up that number at all. I reread the series repeatedly because it's comforting. It's like coming home. So I go away a lot for my work. And when I'm away, I miss my family. I miss my wife. I miss my children. It's hard for me to be away from them because I am very family oriented. I'm very attached to my family. And the books come with me on a tablet, and I read and reread and reread again because it's comforting. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel happy. These are well-known characters, good friends of mine, family that I've known for years, and they helped me through a lot of rough times when I was younger, and even when I'm older. It's just one of those things. It's comforting, and it's helped me through tough times in my life. That's kind of the whole reason I started What Up, is because I wanted to spread and share my joy of the series to other people, without realizing at the time that there was such a big and diverse and amazing community of people who really enjoyed the series as much as I did for varied and different reasons. And it's been an amazing ride so far, and I hope to do this for years and years to come because, the fans of the series are just as amazing as the series himself.
Watt was introduced to me personally by my best friend's oldest brother, back in the mid to late 90s, I want to say, and it probably saved my life. More on that in a minute though. I wasn't really a big reader at that time, and Eye of the World was such a huge book. It seemed insurmountable to me, and I sat on a shelf for a couple years because he gave it to me, he talked it up, Forsaken, in prison, breaking out, and I just didn't read it. So to divert for a second to where I'm coming from here, recently Dwayne Johnson spoke about his battles with depression, and Terry Crews has been pretty vocal about the abuses that he suffered in his life throughout his career. And men tend to internalize a lot of this stuff thanks to the prevalence of toxic masculinity in our society. But after seeing them speak about it openly, it really made me want to open up a little bit and hopefully normalize men speaking about stuff like this so we aren't so terrible. Anyway, school in general was pretty tough for me. I had been regularly abused and bullied starting in first grade and continuing well into high school, which is when I finally picked up Eye of the World. I think I was going in 8th grade at the time, which for us in the States, we call middle school. It's like just before we go into high school, if anyone's watching anywhere else. And I was immediately hooked, immediately. Being able to escape into the world that Robert Jordan and his team created, it saved my life, like I said. I'm not saying that this story in particular has like a magic life-saving theme baked into it or anything like that. It just helped me jump out of my own skin for a little bit and was able to lose myself in this immense, living, breathing world that he created. Now, I say the Wheel of Time, but I also had an amazing teacher who turned a blind eye to me cutting classes and hiding in her classroom where I would sit at her desk in her chair while she taught other classes, and she just kind of ignored me sitting there reading. Other teachers would send tests and work to her class. It became so normal that I would do this. I did well in all those classes. I just avoided them because I had a problem with some of the other kids in those classes. And the teachers too, because some of their responses were to just toughen up or not let it bother me. So I elected to just avoid those situations because I was told any more fights and I could be expelled. So Adriana Glassberg was the teacher who gave me my own setting in which to escape my time of madness and read, and it was pretty fantastic. So honestly, from all that I have from the bottom of my heart, thank you to the Rigney family, to Harriet, Maria, Alan, everyone at Tor that made the Wheel of Time possible, and to Mrs. Glassberg. Glassy. I love y'all.
My first read through of The Wheel of Time was when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I remember reading the prologue to The Eye of the World and just being completely sucked into the magical world that Robert Jordan created. And over the years, what has really stayed with me has been the women of the Wheel of Time series and how strong and varied and diverse they are. And just having role models like Nynaeve and Egwene and Swan was so important to me as a young girl growing up. And even now, whenever I'm facing any sort of challenges, I think about Egwene and how she was able to overcome immense adversity and just show so much strength and power of will. And I find that so inspiring, and the sense of optimism that this series gives me, that evil will always bow down to good, is so comforting. And I think that's part of the reason why I still come back to this series after all these years, and why I will continue to come back to this story. And yeah, I don't think there's ever been a series more influential in my life than The Wheel of Time, and I absolutely love this community, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Hello bookworms, my name's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, which is a booktube channel where I talk about the books that I am reading and have read and want to read. My Wheel of Time reading journey goes back almost 20 years, back to when I was in the 8th grade, somewhere around 2001, 2002. I was just getting into reading adult fantasy. I remember often going to the Barnes & Noble near my house. I used to spend hours just browsing the shelves there. I remember picking up The Eye of the World and thinking that the cover looked ridiculous, but I sat down right there on the aisle and I started reading the prologue, and I was immediately hooked. From there, I went on to read all 9 of the books that were out at that time, all the way up to Winter's Heart. Back then, I wasn't really into knowing when books were coming out, so I'm pretty sure I missed the release of Crossroads of Twilight, the 10th book in the series, and by the time I realized that it was out, I decided to reread the whole series again. After that, I had to wait at least 2, maybe 3 years until the release of Knife of Dreams, and I remember spending hours on websites exploring theories and just reading people's posts from the fandom. I definitely was aware of when Knife of Dreams was coming out, and before it came out, I decided to do another reread, and I read the whole series again. A couple years after that, in 2007, is when Robert Jordan passed away, and I still remember the day that I read that he had passed, and I cried. It was the first time I'd ever cried over an author, but the Wheel of Time series had been such a big part of my high school experience, and I was just so sad that he had passed away before his time. The Gathering Storm, the 12th book in the series, the first one that was written by Brandon Sanderson, came out when I was a senior in college, and the summer after I graduated from undergrad, I decided to reread the whole series again. At this point, I really loved the first half of the series, and I loved being able to pick up on so much of the foreshadowing and picking up on the world building details. It wasn't until 2017, long after the series had finally been completed, I decided I wanted to start over and reread the series all the way through to the end. In 2018, I started a read-along on my channel along with one of my booktube friends, and we read 1 book a month until we finished the series in April of 2019. The feeling of finally finishing this series that I started almost 20 years ago is indescribable. I had grown to love this world and these characters so much, and I really love the way that everything ended. This series has meant so much to me over the years. I grew up reading it, and it will always have a special place in my heart. I'm so excited that I have finally finished this series, and I can talk spoilers with all of you in the Wheel of Time fandom and watch all of the spoilery videos out there. I cannot wait for the TV show to come out, but first I'm gonna need to start another reread.
So I started Wheel of Time about 20 years ago. I wandered into my local Waterstones here in the UK, and I was looking for a fantasy book that lasted longer than a book or 2, because I was kind of getting a little bored, and as weird as it might be for a man to say, I was looking to commit to something. And I walked past the Wheel of Time on the shelf, and I saw 7, 8, 9 books, something of that sort of age. I think it was like 7 books, and yeah, I was like, well, this looks like it's a bit more than a single book. So I read the blurb on the Eye of the World, and I was hooked, and I was back within a month buying the next book. Sadly, I have stumbled upon one other person who has read the series, 2 if I'm honest, and I've lived in a few countries over the years, and one of them didn't like it, stopped reading, and the other one was just like, it's okay, but I like this other stuff better, and barely remembers any details from it. So I've had 20 years of no one to share this with. Until, unfortunately, a world pandemic hit and JordanCon went online, because I've never attended. I attended, and I saw loads of people, Dusty Wheel, just so many people involved. And I was like, wow, I discovered Twitter of Time, and I met so many people. And now I have a YouTube channel where I make Wheel of Time food, hence the chef uniform. I am a chef. And on top of that, I also started a podcast. They're both called Malkier Talks. Just a fun little title. I love Malkier, so, kind of worked for me. The Wheel of Time podcast there is all about theories, sometimes TV shows, sometimes book related, sometimes fun, serious, crazy, all sorts of things. You can find me on Twitter, where I do a daily dad joke, or a tam joke as I like to call them. But that's a little bit about me, and I'm just so happy to be part of this fandom. They're so wonderful, so accepting, so friendly, and my current situation leaves me quite isolated, quite alone. I don't have interaction with many people outside of work because of just how things have worked out for me. So having this fandom is just glorious, and something I absolutely treasure and adore, and I never want to leave. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I've read the book starting in the year 2000 until the last book was released. I have never had someone to talk about the Wheel of Time, but in the beginning of 2019 I've discovered that Amazon's developing a TV show based on the books. I've searched info on YouTube, and I found the channel of Nablis first. I started also following Daniel Green, reactivated my Twitter account to follow the news, and I also entered in some Wheel of Time Facebook related groups. Later I started composing Wheel of Time inspired music, and I started my own music channel. And the last months I offered my skills to other Wheel of Time creators. I wrote music and made designs for some of them. I enter in a lot of Discord servers, and I follow the news every single day. This is a passion of mine in the last year and a half, and this helps me to get through these difficult times.
So I found the Wheel of Time based off of a suggestion from a friend. He hooked me on it when he said, hey, this is based off of like Eastern mythology and cyclical nature of time, which I was super into back in 2005. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and grab it and read it. I went and picked up Eye of the World, and I read up through, chapter 10, I believe it was, and I put the book down, and for one reason or another, I didn't pick it up again for 5 years. So during that time, I went off to college, all that stuff. But yeah, for 2005 to 2010, I didn't touch the book for whatever reason. I made all sorts of excuses. Do this thing where I'm like, oh, I see something that's really long. Oh, it looks like it might turn into work. I'm going to take a break. And then the break lasts forever. So in 2010, one of my favorite bands, Blind Guardian, released their album At the Edge of Time, which featured not one, but two really epic songs based off the Wheel of Time, and that inspired me to go ahead and finish. Around this time, one of my friends from college, my co-host on the Gleemen, actually, Drew, found out I liked the series as well, and he spent the next 9 years, that's how long it took me, 9 years, pushing me to finish the series. So I always tell everyone, I started in 2005 and I read at a glacial average of 1 book per year. It was well worth it. I cannot recommend The Wheel of Time enough to any avid reading fan out there. It is hands down the best fantasy series I've ever read, and it has the richest, most detailed world I've ever lived in. The characters are authentic and they're wonderful. Look at me getting all emotional here. Anyway, that's my experience with it. I hope you all pick it up and enjoy it.
I am a huge Wheel of Time fan. I first started reading when my dad handed me The Eye of the World back in 1993, many, many moons ago. I blazed through the 5 or 6 books that were out at that time. I can't quite remember. And then I read them again. And then I read them again, and I had questions. So I searched out the online community, and I found Usenet, and I found AOL, and I found people that are still around today, like Lee Butler, and some that have faded. Reading The Wheel of Time really profoundly affected me. It affected my taste in books. It affected my reading speed because I can blaze through books a lot quicker now. It taught me patience, waiting for each book to come out. It was a lot of learned behaviors for a 14-year-old girl up through my early 20s. I had children and got married and slacked off on the online community, but I never stopped reading The Wheel of Time. Even to the point of putting it on my body. Rand is on my body. It is, always will be, in my top 3 books and series. It gained me friends and taught me about myself in ways you wouldn't expect a fantasy series to do. I cannot wait until my children are old enough that I can put the book in their hands. I really am happy to have found this at such a young age and to have been part of the community for almost 30 years.
So I discovered Wheel of Time in high school. I had a few friends that were very into the series, including Jake, who reviews Wheel of Time with me on Fantology, and they would be reading these books like all the time. We were in choir together, and in between every rehearsal or every song we sing, like the books were back out. And I was always curious, like, what are they reading? This seems to be very, very intriguing to them, at least, so maybe I am missing out on something here. So I picked up The Eye of the World and then blazed through the first 12 books at the time. And then by that time, Robert Jordan had recently passed away. Sanderson was taking over the final 3. I was just in time to finish the first 13 and then be ready for the Towers of Midnight release, and was fortunate enough to attend the midnight release party at the BYU bookstore Sanderson ran. Kind of funny, now his release parties are epically large, but at the time it was just in the small bookstore. And then I had to wait for A Memory of Light, but compared to a lot of folks in the fandom, I'm guessing that waiting for one book is not anything to complain about. So Wheel of Time for me was the series that opened my eyes to what fantasy books could be. It was a gateway from Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, etc. Wheel of Time was a gateway into a lot of additional books and series that we now review on Fantology and that I love to get into. So I cannot say enough of the impact that Wheel of Time has had on my life in introducing me to a lifelong love of reading. So thank you, Robert Jordan, so much for coming up with this series and persevering through an epically large series. And thank you, Sanderson, for finishing the series. Love Wheel of Time. It will always, always be in at least my top 3 series of all time. It probably is number 1 right now, especially since the way that it was finished and just how masterfully everything came together by the end. Fantastic series. Love it.
The Wheel of Time fandom has been around for over 30 years, and it's stronger than ever. And with a big budget TV show on the way, it's going to only continue to grow. Getting to be a part of it and to contribute to this fandom, even in a small way, is something I will always be grateful for.